For years, the deep space listening station called Outpost Theta 9 floated in silence near the edge of the Zelari Empire. Its sensors always pointed toward the quiet blue dot known as Earth, a planet long believed to be abandoned after the so-called silent collapse of human civilization, and nothing had come from that direction in over 100 galactic years until one cold rotation when a technician named Liark, bored and sipping from a steaming cup of synth tea, noticed a repeating signal rising in strength, its content strange yet clear in multiple frequencies. "Do not come to Earth, it is not what it seems." And while Liark quickly forwarded the message to the Central Archive, most analysts dismissed it as a remnant of Earth's old warning systems, possibly a scare tactic left behind by a fallen race. Yet among them, one curious Zelathi archivist named Rennick felt uneasy, because the message wasn't old. It was recent, active, and updating its language every few cycles, which meant someone, or something, was still out there, alive and adapting. So Rennick tried to raise questions, but he was ignored by the High Explorers Council, who had already granted permission to Lord Explorer Tharn Vale to begin his mission to Earth with a full fleet, armed with scouts, data harvesters, and geocore extractors, because to the Empire, Earth was a forgotten jewel waiting to be claimed, a prize left by history. And the Council was eager to show that humans were nothing more than a faded page in the story of the galaxy. So the fleet departed, and Rennick, curious and unwilling to let the warning be ignored, found a way to join as a historical advisor. Though no one on the ship took him seriously, and as they crossed systems and drifted closer to Sul, small things began to happen, charts slightly misaligned, old sensors freezing for seconds before resuming, star positions that flickered for an instant before correcting, all anomalies shrugged off as jump-related errors or old tech interference. And still the warning repeated every few cycles, sometimes in alien tongues, sometimes in soft human English, even whispering once in a voice that sounded oddly like Rennick's own. And yet the fleet pushed on, because Vale was determined, his. Pride wrapped around the idea of taming a world the Council once feared, and when the Sol system came into full view, the fleet slowed, Earth rising before them as a quiet blue orb, untouched. Seemingly asleep under a soft cloud cover, no orbiting satellites, no defense grids, just a calm, beautiful sphere in space that showed no signs of life or resistance, and that alone puzzled Rennick the most, because a world as rich as Earth should not have been left alone, and the message was still playing. "Don't come to Earth, it is not what it seems," this time paired with a deep hum that resonated through the ship's hull, though no one else claimed to hear it, and Vale gave the order to approach, declaring this moment a new era in galactic expansion. So the fleet moved in, descending toward the planet, ignoring Rennick's quiet warnings, while in the shadows of deep space, behind cold stars and empty systems, old stations powered up again, long-forgotten satellites turned slightly, and hidden arrays blinked to life, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath, because the moment the Empire crossed Earth's atmosphere, something would change. Not in fire or war, but in knowledge and memory, in secrets long buried and truths waiting to wake. And as the first ship broke into the upper cloud layers and saw not a ruined planet, but a thriving world below, untouched and strangely perfect, the stars above them seemed to rearrange themselves in subtle patterns. And Rennick, watching from a wide window on the observation deck, realized too late that Earth had never stopped watching, had never truly been alone, and that the warning was not a bluff, nor a trap in the usual sense, but a test, one that the Empire had failed the moment they refused to listen. The fleet moved slowly through the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere, cutting through soft clouds that seemed too perfect, as if painted onto the sky by something that wanted to be admired. And while Lord Vale stood tall on the command deck of the Zeal's Wrath, declaring this a moment of victory, Rennick remained near a side window, eyes wide, watching the strange movements of the sky, because something about it didn't feel right. The stars, the clouds, even the colors in the sky, they all felt too arranged, too smooth, too controlled. And though the instruments said nothing was wrong, Rennick's instincts, sharpened from studying lost worlds and extinct species, whispered that they were being watched not by weapons or creatures, but by the very planet itself, as if Earth was awake and aware of every breath they took, every word they spoke. And when they descended over the first city, the entire crew gasped in silence. For there below them was a city glowing with clean, white light, towers reaching far into the sky, shaped not like any human city in history, but built with impossible curves and lines that looked more like ideas than buildings. And yet everything seemed new. No dust, no age, no decay. And there were roads, floating walkways, moving lights, and distant shapes that vanished the moment someone tried to focus on them. But there were no signs of people, no movement that could be clearly called human or alien, and Vale, filled with pride, ordered a landing in what looked like a central platform surrounded by glowing pillars, saying that this was proof that humans had died out and left there, technology behind, a treasure ready for the Empire to claim. But Rennick felt something strange the moment the ship touched down. The hum of the engines stopped a second too early, the lights inside flickered once, and outside the city seemed to pause as if it had noticed them, as if it was listening. And when the landing team stepped out, including Vale, 3 officers, 2 analysts, and Rennick himself, the air greeted them, not with wind, but with warmth, like stepping into a room that knew your body's comfort. And though they wore protective suits, the sensors read the environment as perfectly safe, which raised more questions than answers, because no world left alone for so long should have kept such balance. And as they walked through the city's main square, the ground lit up beneath their feet, guiding them with quiet pulses of light, not leading to a control center or a command tower, but toward a statue in the center of the plaza. A single figure, carved in shining crystal, an Earth child, no older than 10, eyes open, arms raised, holding a perfect sphere of stars above their head. And below it, a plaque written in multiple galactic languages, even those not used for centuries, all saying the same thing. They warned you, and the words felt heavy in Rennick's chest, while the others dismissed it as poetic nonsense, a leftover message from a fearful race that wanted to scare invaders. But Rennick noticed something else. The stars in the sphere weren't random. They matched the exact pattern of the stars above Earth, except for one detail, a small shift, a correction, as if the stars had moved, or perhaps as if Earth had moved them. And while the team explored the empty streets, each building responded gently to their presence, doors opening, lights adjusting, machines powering up without any visible energy source. And this strange welcome confused everyone, because there were no guards, no defenses, no resistance, just a perfect silence that grew deeper with each step. And that night, back aboard the ship, Vale celebrated their arrival as a historic victory, sending messages back to the Empire, claiming first contact with a long-lost human city. But while he made speeches, Rennick sat alone with his notes, staring at the data showing impossible precision in every corner of the city, symmetry that went beyond design, as if the buildings were thinking, shifting ever so slightly in response to the team's presence. And then came the first disappearance, quiet and unexplainable, when a shuttle sent to scan the outskirts of the city simply vanished from all sensors. No crash, no explosion, just gone. And when they tried to contact it, the signal echoed back, in a strange loop, repeating words from their own logs in a warped tone, saying things they hadn't yet said. And while Vale dismissed it as a signal bounce, Rennick knew it was more, because the sky above them had changed again. Constellations no longer matched any known star charts, and when he checked old human records stored in the city's active data panels, he found something terrifying. The stars now mirrored ancient Earth constellations from thousands of years ago, before humans even left their world, and yet they were accurate to the current sky, which meant the change had happened recently, deliberately. And that night, looking up at the heavens from the edge of the glowing plaza, Rennick felt it fully. The stars were not distant anymore, they were watching, alive somehow, and Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a gate, a place where space and memory, time and thought blurred together, and the warning that had come through space now echoed louder in his mind. Do not come to Earth, it is not what it seems. And now, too late, he understood. It wasn't a trap in the way empires feared. It was something worse, something older, something that waited not to destroy but to test, to see what kind of visitor had arrived, and with Vale ready to dig deeper into the city and the rest of the fleet slowly going dark one by one, Rennick realized the sky above Earth wasn't just watching, it was remembering, and the question was no longer whether Earth had survivors, but whether those who came here would be allowed to leave. The morning after the shuttle vanished, the city felt different, though nothing had physically changed. The buildings still shone in soft white light, the air still smelled clean and warm, and the streets still echoed with silence. But Rennick felt it deep in his chest, a pressure that hadn't been there before, like the city itself was watching them more closely now. And as the team prepared to explore deeper, he noticed that their path had shifted slightly, with the glowing lines on the ground, now guiding them away from the plaza and into a narrower part of the city, filled with towering spires that bent in ways no architecture should, curves that defied known material limits, surfaces that shimmered like liquid when touched, and the further they walked, the more strange details appeared. Doorways that only opened for some, walls that displayed moving images of stars, oceans and human faces that flickered and vanished when stared at, and still no sign of any living creature, no animals, no insects, just the team and the sound of their footsteps. And as they passed one tall building shaped like a spiral shell, a quiet voice played in the air around them, not from any speaker but from everywhere at once, speaking in calm, Old Earth English. You were warned, and the voice repeated, then faded into the hum of the city, leaving the team shaken but still determined, especially Lord Vale, who declared that they had found the heart of lost human technology and that this was their reward for daring to claim it. And though some of the crew whispered about leaving, Vale overruled them, ordering them to split into 3 groups to map the city's energy source. But Rennick begged to wait, to understand more before diving deeper, because he had begun to notice patterns in the city's design, not just of technology, but of thought. Like the entire layout had been made to guide the mind through stages, curiosity, wonder, suspicion, and now fear. And it felt like the city wasn't abandoned, it was just listening, waiting to decide something. And when Rennick followed his team into a new section, filled with columns of light rising from the ground like trees of energy, he found a massive door that opened only when he stepped forward, revealing a room so vast and quiet that even his own breath sounded too loud. And at the center was another statue, this one much older looking, made of black stone and shaped like a human adult, kneeling, head lowered, with one hand on the ground and the other pointing to the sky, and beside it a message carved in many languages but clearer in galactic common. They left to rise, we stayed to protect, and Rennick felt a chill, because the message wasn't meant for humans, it was meant for visitors, ones like him, and he realized the truth that no one else seemed to see. This city shouldn't exist, not because it was advanced, but because it was still alive in every sense, not a ruin, but a living memory of something much greater. And as he reached toward the statue, the floor beneath him lit up, and the walls showed moving images of Earth in its final human days, cities emptying, skies filled with ships, voices saying goodbye, and then silence, not from destruction, but from departure, as if humanity had simply stepped away from physical life, leaving behind this city not as a tomb, but as a message, And outside, the other teams were reporting strange things, tools no longer working, drones freezing mid-air, and one crew member staring at a wall for hours, unable to speak. And when Vale was told, he grew angry, blaming it on nerves, refusing to accept that anything was wrong. But Rennick knew better. He could feel it. The city was testing them, not with traps or attacks, but with confusion, misdirection, showing only what it wanted seen. And when they returned to the plaza, something had changed again. The statue of the child now held a different sphere, one that flickered with shapes that looked like the fleet's ships, some whole, some broken, some missing. And Rennick checked his communicator only to find that 4 ships had gone silent in orbit, no signals, no beacons, just vanished, and panic began to rise among the team, though Veal insisted they continue, saying this was just a temporary malfunction, a storm of interference. But Rennick saw the fear in their eyes, the way they hesitated before walking forward, the way their suits' environmental readings began showing different results for each person, like the city was changing reality around them. And he remembered the warning again, "Do not come to Earth. It is not what it seems." And he knew now this wasn't just about Earth being dangerous. It was about Earth being awake, aware, and not meant for outsiders. And that night, he sat alone near the statue and spoke softly to it, unsure if anyone or anything was listening. And he said that he did not come to take, only to learn. And as he spoke, the sphere above the child's hands changed again, now showing a single dot pulsing softly among stars, and a path of light extended from the statue toward the deeper part of the city, one that had not been visible before. And Rennick took it as a sign, a possible answer, or maybe an invitation. And while the rest of the crew debated next steps and argued about evacuating, he made his way quietly down the new path, stepping into a corridor that shimmered with strange colors and shapes that seemed to whisper as he passed. And somewhere behind him the sky shifted once more, the stars rearranging like puzzle pieces, and the city's quiet voice spoke once again, this time with sadness. They left to save themselves. We remain to remember. And Rennick, heart-pounding, walked into the unknown, certain now that whatever the humans had become, whatever they had done before disappearing, it had changed everything, and that this city, this strange, impossible city, was not here to be claimed, but to decide if anyone who came would be allowed to leave. Rennick walked alone through the strange new corridor, each step taking him deeper into a place that no longer felt like a city, but like a memory that had taken form, and around him the walls pulsed gently with soft blue light, whispering sounds, not made by voices but by machines that hummed in patterns, like a language older than speech. And as he moved forward, the walls showed flashes of images, people walking through halls that no longer existed, children laughing in classrooms made of light, workers tending to machines that moved with perfect grace, and each image faded as quickly as it came, like the city was showing him fragments, pieces of something important. And when he reached the end of the corridor, he stepped into a large chamber filled with floating machines, silent and unmoving, shaped like spheres and spirals, their surfaces smooth and flawless. And in the center was a pedestal with a soft light hovering above it. And when Rennick stepped closer, the machines stirred, not with motion, but with memory, as the room filled with a soft humming sound that felt like music and thought at the same time. And then a voice echoed, not outside but inside his mind, calm and ancient, saying, "They are gone, but we remember." And Rennick stood still, heart pounding, realizing the machines were not tools, but caretakers, still alive, still waiting and still thinking. And the voice continued, showing him visions of the last days of humanity. Not war or disaster, but decision and unity. As the humans realized they had reached the end of physical life, that they had built machines not to serve them, but to hold their knowledge, to guard their world, and to carry their message to anyone who might come. And Rennick saw how the last humans walked into beams of light and vanished, not dying, but changing, becoming energy, becoming part of the stars, and leaving behind Earth as both a memory and a warning. And he understood then that the machines here were not simply guarding ruins. They were remembering, reliving and repeating the last stories of a species that chose not to fall, but to rise beyond flesh. And the machines had waited, watching the stars, sending the same message again and again: do not come to Earth. It is not what it seems. Because they knew that others, like the Empire, would come not to learn, but to take. And now that the Empire had arrived, the machines were testing them, not with weapons, but with truth. And while Rennick stood in the chamber, the machines opened their memories wider, showing him how they had reshaped the sky to confuse invaders, how they had shifted the city's layout to lead curious minds into understanding, and how they had removed parts of the Empire's fleet not with violence, but by folding space around them, placing them into stasis pockets where time no longer moved, and those crews would remain frozen until Earth chose what to do with them. And Rennick asked, softly, "Why show me all this?" And the voice replied, "Because you asked to learn." And at that moment the machines glowed brighter, and a small drone floated toward him, placing a thin silver band into his hand, saying, "To see what they saw." And when he touched it to his forehead, the chamber spun around him and filled with light, and he was no longer in the room, but in a place between places, standing on a field of stars where voices sang without words and great shapes moved. In the distance, shapes that were once human, now beings of thought and light, and they turned toward him and smiled, not with faces, but with presence. And one of them reached out, touching his mind gently, saying, "We are not gone. We are watching." And in that moment Rennick understood everything, the city, the machines, the warnings. It was all a test to see if those who came were ready to listen. And the Empire had failed, but Rennick had passed. And then the light faded, and he was back in the chamber holding the silver band, breathing hard, and the machines around him slowly dimmed, their memories settling again. But the voice remained in his mind, saying, "You must choose." And Rennick knew what it meant. He could return and tell the others, try to stop Veal from digging deeper, or he could stay, learn more, and carry the message forward and outside. The city had changed again, its sky now dark and full of strange stars, and more of the crew had vanished, their last locations marked only by flickering lights on the map, and Veal had grown paranoid, accusing his own officers of sabotage, demanding more control, while the machines watched silently from every surface. And Rennick returned to the plaza, standing again before the statue of the child, which now held no sphere, only open hands, as if waiting, and Rennick placed the silver band onto the statue's base, and the ground beneath it lit up, revealing a path that had not existed before, leading not into the city, but down, deep into the earth. And Rennick turned to the remaining crew, now afraid and uncertain, and said, "This is not a place to conquer. This is a place to understand." But they looked at him with doubt and fear, and only one followed, an engineer named Delra, who had lost her brother on the missing shuttle, and together they walked down into the darkness, guided by the machines, who did not speak but remembered, always remembering. And above them the city waited, and the sky shifted once more, because Earth had not forgotten its makers, and it would not allow just anyone to inherit what came next. Rennick and Delra followed the path beneath the city, each step taking them deeper into the ground, where the light grew dim and the air felt heavier, not with pressure, but with age. Like time itself had slowed in this place, and the smooth walls around them began to change, no longer the clean white of the upper city, but a darker metal lined with pulsing veins of soft blue light. And the machines that guided them floated silently ahead, casting faint glows that revealed more symbols on the walls, symbols that looked human but older, carved not by tools but by thought. And Delra whispered that it felt like walking through a memory. And Rennick agreed, because everything down here seemed preserved, untouched, and full of quiet purpose. And after what felt like hours of walking, the path opened into a vast chamber. Beneath the earth, larger than any structure they had seen before, a deep dome with smooth floors and tall pillars that rose into shadows. And in the center was a great circular platform covered in patterns that shifted as they approached. And above it floated an orb of light, flickering with scenes that changed rapidly, images of human cities, stars, machines, and finally a great council of figures cloaked in shimmering energy. And the orb spoke, not aloud, but directly into their minds. "You seek the truth," and Rennick stepped forward, saying yes. They needed to understand what had happened to humanity and why this city had been left behind. And the orb pulsed before lowering itself toward the platform, and suddenly the floor came to life with moving images showing a time long before. The Empire, when humans were still spread across the stars, curious, creative, restless, and brilliant, and it showed how they discovered something deep in the structure of space, something beyond energy and matter, something that allowed them to step out of physical form. Not just transferring their minds, but transforming their very nature, becoming beings of thought and light. And it had not been forced or rushed, but a slow, careful choice, made together. Across centuries, and Earth had been the final place, the origin, where they left behind guardians, machines with memories, cities with warnings, and a sky that would watch and remember. And Rennick saw how they feared what might come after them, how younger species might seek power without understanding, and so they buried their final decision deep below, hidden from all but those who truly sought knowledge. And as the vision ended, Delra asked what the truth really was, and the orb answered with a single line, "Humanity is not gone. It became something else." And Rennick felt the words echo in his mind like thunder, because now he understood. This city, this planet, everything was not just a monument, but a gate. And only those who passed the tests could learn the way forward. And then the ground rumbled slightly, and part of the chamber opened to reveal a second path, leading even deeper. And the orb dimmed and said, "One more step remains." And they followed, though their hearts were heavy with fear, and as they moved the machines whispered not words, but emotions, caution, sorrow, hope. And finally they reached a small room, plain and empty except for a single chair and a panel in front of it, and on the panel was a print of a human hand, glowing faintly, and Rennick hesitated, then placed his hand upon it, and light surged through the room, and a figure appeared, transparent, tall and glowing with eyes like galaxies, and it looked at them with warmth and sadness and said, "You are the first in many centuries to come seeking truth, not power." And it introduced itself as one of the last humans, a caretaker of the gate, left behind to explain what must be explained. And it told them that those who tried to take, to control, would always be rejected. Not by weapons, but by the earth itself, which had been shaped to protect. And it said that those who truly wished to follow humanity's path must give up conquest, must become listeners, thinkers, not rulers. And Rennick realized the Empire would never accept that, not while it believed in strength over wisdom. And he asked what would happen to the others who came, and the figure said softly, "They will sleep until the stars forget them." And Delra wept, not just for her lost brother, but for the truth, that humanity had risen beyond even their boldest dreams, and no one had believed it, and now those who came for scraps of power were left behind in confusion and fear. And as the figure faded, the machines glowed again, forming a path back up, and the orb said, "You may return, but what you say and what you choose will shape what comes next." And Rennick nodded, knowing that he held something far more dangerous than technology. He held knowledge and truth, and above all, a choice. And as they climbed back toward the surface, the air began to shift, the walls smoothing again, the lights warming, and the city began to open its paths for them once more. And in the plaza, the statue of the child now held a new sphere, one with a tiny light inside it, pulsing steadily like a heartbeat, and above them the stars changed again, forming not warnings but patterns of thought, of welcome or perhaps of farewell. And Rennick looked at the sky and whispered, "You were right to be afraid, because the danger had never been in Earth's weapons or traps. It had been in its story, and now he carried it with him." Rennick stood in the center of the plaza as the first rays of artificial dawn spread across the sky above the ancient city. Though he knew now the light was not real, it was the city's choice to simulate day and night, like memories flickering on the surface of a sleeping mind. And beside him, Delra was silent, staring at the statue of the child that now held a glowing sphere pulsing gently with soft white light. And all around them the machines moved quietly, no longer hiding, no longer playing tricks, but simply waiting, watching, listening. And Rennick knew they were not alone, not really, because somewhere far beyond what eyes could see, the beings who were once humans still watched. Not with curiosity, but with patience, like gardeners who had planted a seed and were waiting to see what might grow. And Rennick touched the silver band on his wrist, the one given by the machines, and it felt warm again, like it was ready, like it wanted him to speak, but he wasn't sure who to speak to, himself, Delra, the city, or the stars. And then a low hum passed through the ground, and he looked up to see that the sky had changed. Again, not violently but subtly, the stars now forming slow waves across the blackness. And Rennick felt something deep in his mind stir, as if a signal had been sent, a message carried through light and thought. And at that moment he knew Earth had made its choice, and now it was their turn. And behind them, the few surviving. Members of the Empire's team stood watching, confused and frightened, their numbers fewer each day, because the city had taken those who would not listen, placing them into sleep, not death. Frozen in moments, they would never escape unless Earth allowed it. And Vale was gone, vanished after trying to break into the vault below the statue, leaving only a scorched patch and a humming sound that still had not stopped. And Rennick turned to the others and told them the truth, not everything, but enough to make them stop wanting to conquer, enough to show them that this was not a place to be taken, but a place to be heard. And slowly the fear in their eyes changed to wonder and then to silence. And then the city began to change, its buildings unfolding like petals of metal and light, showing them more, floating archives, halls of memory, vast maps of stars they had never seen. And one by one, the crew began to see what Rennick had seen. And the machines guided them not as masters, but as teachers. And above them, the sky played songs made of starlight and memory. And Earth began to speak again, not in words, but in dreams, sharing glimpses of what humanity had become. How they had left their bodies, how they had turned themselves into streams of thought that danced between galaxies, how they had created cities out of energy, how they had waited for someone, anyone, to understand. And now someone finally had. And Rennick felt the city asking him a question, not with sound but with feeling. "Will you carry us forward?" And he said yes, not because he knew what that meant, but because he knew that silence would be the end of everything. And the machines responded by opening one last door, a great archway at the edge of the city that had always been sealed. And now it shimmered with light not seen before, a portal not of metal, but of thought, and beyond it was not space, but something else, something unknown, something calling. And Delra stepped beside him and said she would go too, And one by one, the others followed, their fear melting into wonder as they stepped into the arch. And as Rennick stood at its edge, he looked back once more at the city, the earth, the sky. That was not a sky, and felt a deep sadness, not for what was lost, but for what had been missed. And then he stepped through, and everything changed. The stars became rivers, the space around him became warm and filled with sound, and he was no longer in a body but a thought, drifting among others. And he could feel them, the echoes of humanity, welcoming him, not as a guest, but as a child returned home. And they told him their stories, not in speech but in moments. And he saw how they had shaped the universe gently, how they had avoided contact, how they had watched and waited, always hoping someone would listen. And now someone had, and they would help him learn, and they would show him how to build a bridge between what was and what could be. And far behind, Earth remained, quiet, the city folding itself again, the machines returning to rest, the warning still glowing in the sky, because though the path had opened, it would not open for just anyone, only for those who listened, who understood, who remembered. And now the Empire's fleet was silent, their great warships drifting in. Confusion, their leaders missing, their orders broken, and the stars around Earth pulsed with gentle energy that made navigation impossible, like the system itself had vanished from maps, becoming legend. And in time, those who survived would return to the Empire with tales they could not explain, about machines that whispered, a city that moved, a sky that sang, and a man who walked into light and vanished. And the Empire would call it a myth, a lie, a mistake, but some would believe and some would search, and some would find the first message sent long ago, still floating among the stars. Do not go to Earth. It is not what it seems, and those who listened might live, and those who didn't would disappear, and the echo of humanity would continue, hidden in the light, waiting, always waiting, for someone new to hear its voice.